Commonly, wild animals will avoid human contact as much as possible due to natural fear. So, when a tigress came up to a solitary guy, he was completely taken aback by the extraordinary request she made of him. Joseph has always found the wilderness to be a fascinating and enchanted place. Joseph was reared in a little Russian hamlet that was surrounded by a lovely forest. Joseph's father took him hunting, tracking, and just exploring the forest whenever he could, when he was a kid. By the time he was an adult, Joseph was well versed in the forest, had learned to take care of himself there, and was confident in his ability to track down the greatest game. But he couldn't have known that his enthusiasm for the wilderness would eventually lead to a crisis that would alter the course of his life irrevocably. Joseph's day began off like any other. He awoke when the sun was rising, and then set out into the woods to begin working. He had run out of meat, and a few clients had urged him to fetch more. Therefore, Joseph went into the woods in search of wildlife. Throughout the morning, the sun crossed the woodland in a halo of ethereal light that the hunter could not comprehend. Once it was lunchtime on my day, Joseph opted to stop hunting and prepare himself a bird he had caught. Even though he was in an unknown part of the forest, Joseph didn't feel threatened, since he knew he could always retrace his steps and return to the settlement. The shooter could see a bright area ahead of him, indicating a clearing that would be ideal for a rest stop. But when Joseph stepped into the little clearing, he certainly wasn't expecting to discover what he did. Joseph was terrified when he saw the tiger standing in the midst of the clearing. When Joseph stepped from the woods, the animal's gaze was fixed on him, showing that it had heard him approaching. However, despite the guy being caught off surprise, the tiger showed no signs of wanting to harm him. The cat, in fact, was behaving quite serenely. Joseph saw this as an opening and swiftly lifted his rifle, aiming it towards the animal. But the large cat made no attempt to flee, and instead continued to stare the hunter down. Joseph lowered his revolver and inched closer to the tiger, confused by the animal's actions, but unwilling to fire at such a magnificent creature if it presented no real danger. As it saw the guy approaching, the tiger backed away, snarling gently as a warning. Joseph watched the animal move and saw that the milk was flowing freely from her teats, confirming his suspicion that it was a female. This indicated the presence of cubs. The horse was obviously limping, which was another item that Joseph saw. The hunter approached the tigress cautiously, his voice rising in a quiet plea for her. This seemed to appease the animal, as she stopped snarling and enabled the guy to approach to within a few feet. Joseph's wound was considerably severe than he had first believed after he got near to the large cat and seen the tigress. The feline seemed to have been shot in the rear of the leg. It was not a clean kill, and the animal was obviously sick to the point where it was in danger of dying. Joseph, horrified by the wound's condition, rushed to provide assistance, but the large cat pushed him away by her threatening roars. The animal then proceeded to do something miraculous. She turned and walked away toward the border of the meadow, but stopped short of the woods. Joseph then started to hear little, small mews and grunts. Yes, they were the young of the tigress. The mother lion scooped up one of her cubs by the paw and hobbled back to Joseph. When the cat finally approached the hunter, she placed the cub carefully at his feet. She retrieved another cabin and hoisted it close to the first. Joseph was completely befuddled and shocked by the events unfolding before him. He was frightened to ask the tigress what he should do with her pups, since he had no idea what she would do if she found out he had. The tigress started to wander away from the shooter and her young at that time. Joseph was taken aback and attempted to signal the animal to hold off. However, the cat just glanced up at Joseph before darting off into the forest. In disbelief, the hunter watched the unfolding events. Nonetheless, he was aware their mother tiger wouldn't abandon her cubs until absolutely necessary. He was concerned that the mother cat had little time left and was doing all she could to protect her babies. Don't want to abandon the two cub tigers to fend for alone. Joseph gathered the animals in his hands and returned home from the wilderness. When they were back in the hamlet, Joseph took the two cubs to the village veterinarian. He needed to make sure the infants were healthy enough to be raised by him. After the veterinarian gave the 2 kittens a good health report and instructed Joseph on how to care for them, such as what to give them and how frequently as they matured, the hunter brought the tigers home and did as he was instructed. Young cubs Sasha and Alexei, given to Joseph by their mother, grew steadily bigger and stronger over the following months. One day, staff from the municipal zoo in the area learned about the 2 cubs. They went up to Joseph and made an offer to purchase the 2 kids from him in order that they might be kept as exhibits at the zoo. The hunters were prepared to pay a lot of money to get the animals back, but the hunter would not sell. He was worried that if he did so, he would betray the mom tigress who had placed her young in Joseph's care. At some point, it became necessary to release the 2 tigers back into the wild. They were now stunning young adults who were well equipped to live in the wild on their own. Joseph was sorry to see the creatures go, but he understood that they belonged in the forest. A few years later, while wandering the woods in search of game, Joseph remembered the spot where he first seen the tigress and her cubs and decided to return again. He held out hope that, against all chances, the 2 pets he'd raised might turn up nearby. When Joseph finally reached the clearing, he saw that everything looked much the same. Even though there are a number of suspicious holes in the ground, the hunter did not think twice about pitching his tent in the clearing and spending the night there. He looked up from his fire to see a massive grizzly bear emerging from the trees into the clearing. The bear had seen the hunter quickly and was now charging. With no other choice, Joseph leaped up and ran into the woods to get away from the bears after remembering that he'd left his rifle in his tent. The massive grizzly continued to pursue Joseph and eventually met up with the scared hunter. However, just when it looked that Joseph would not make it, orange and black blurs came from the woods and stepped into the gap between bear and the hunter. By the time Joseph had calmed himself enough to make out that the blurs were really Sasha and Alexei, the 2 older tigers had wanted to ensure that Joseph was on their side in their fight against enraged grizzly. The bear became tired of waiting and wandered off. Joseph was astounded that the 2 pets he had reared had shown up to aid him in his moment of need. Joseph was checked on, and the tigers returned to the woods. Joseph was pleased to observe the 2 creatures flourishing in their natural habitat, even though he knew it might be the last time he saw them. Leave a comment and tell me what you think of the tale. To receive more great videos like this, please subscribe and hit that like button.